Guys, good Wednesday morning. I'm Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk with Keith Smith. Thank you kindly for joining us. Great to be with you in Central Virginia, but with an audience across the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love CVille Network on a show presented on a Wednesday by Ross Mortgage and Scott Morris. Scott Morris, not only a virtuoso when it comes to financing your house, not only a virtuoso with a tool belt and a hammer, but also a virtuoso from a storytelling standpoint, and I believe we're going to hear quite the tale of Keith Smith and Yonna Smith in California. That's where the Smiths are, if you're wondering. You'll see Quinton Beckham and Scott Morris on set. Scott, I'm very curious to see this or hear this story of Keith Smith and Yonna Smith in California.
So this isn't a Keith and Yonna story. This is I joke. It's not so much a joke. I am just an old redneck, and I had a friend who was living out in San Diego, and this is 20 years ago. I think I had just gotten back from being stationed in Cuba, guarding those detainees. I flew out to see her. We're hanging out. I'm in a car with a bunch of people, and this is one of these things that when it comes out of your mouth, like you know it was wrong, but you can't take it back. And we're going to La Jolla, and I grew up here in Virginia, where a Hoya is a bulldog in Georgetown. Like that's a thing. And riding down the road, we're merging off an exit, and I look up, and I see the sign, and my brain goes, La Jolla, and as soon as I say it, everybody in the car was just like, it's like the record screeches, you know? Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You walk into the dance, and everyone stops and looks at you.
And immediately I went, that was not right. But I love the talent. It's amazing. Now, it's also one of the first things that kind of taught me about location and with real estate, because while we were down there, there's a comedy store. I think the Laugh Factory is down there, and just a couple blocks off the beach, there are literally like what would be kind of like the shed that you'd keep your lawnmower in, but maybe a little bit nicer with a picket fence around it, that were selling for $1 million a piece 22 years ago.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, Quinton Beckham can speak about this. I mean, SoCal in his blood, right?
Just dissing my hometown, man.
Yeah. Seriously.
There's no diss there. I was just, I love the area. It's super nice. It's an amazing place. But it was like the shock value at 22 years old was very real for me.
Yeah.
Louisa County Board of Supervisor Fitzgerald Barnes, welcome to the program. Quinton Beckham, any SoCal, California memories?
So I had a friend come visit from Virginia, first time in Southern California. He didn't understand how airports work, so he landed in Long Beach, which was the farthest airport from me with the worst highways around it. And so I picked him up, and we're on the 5 freeway, which is just like wall-to-wall cars, and he can't imagine that, and his mind's blown. And he keeps trying to pronounce names like Francisquito and La Quinta, and so I'm talking him through like, these are Spanish names, and so you speak, pretend you know Spanish. Oh, okay. So we're driving along the freeway, crawling along. He's reading all the signs, and he looks up and he's like, "Oh, look, La Fitness." No, that's
LA Fitness.
I like it. LA Fitness.
Did you laugh?
I was too embarrassed.
LA Fitness. That is hilarious.
It's not La Fitness. No.
LA Fitness. It's LA Fitness.
The cringe is real.
For those that don't know, this is the first time Quinton Beckham, QB, and Scott Morris have met. Institutions locally, now on set here on Real Talk. Quinton Beckham was inspiring earlier in the week. I've heard that from quite a few people, including this morning as I was walking out of the gym. Let's get Scott Morris's take with the week over week and what you're seeing in the market, what you're seeing at your desk at Ross Mortgage.
So we've seen a lot of activity in the last 2 to 3 weeks. And again, none of it seems rate related because we, ebbs and flows with quality and quantity of leads. The people who I'm dealing with, who are out making real estate decisions, are making them based off of real life circumstances. And I kind of hammer that home, but that's truly what we see. Moving up because where they are is too small, moving out because they don't get along. Those types of scenarios. But then from a rate perspective, I mean, we've kind of been in line with where me out here just guessing or forecasting is no different than anybody else who gets on and talks and does these things. But I think I've been more accurate than a lot. And one of the things I said, we'd go higher faster than people predicted. We went higher faster than we predicted. When I said that we'd kind of peaked, at the time I thought I'd missed it, but now looking at everything, I think I was there. What we've seen is as the Feds continue to increase the prime rate, we've seen some potential negative forecasts for the economy. The bond market has priced that in. We're seeing a lot of volatility back and forth, and it's kind of been a hedge between a recession and an inflation bet. And today we saw good news potentially as far as inflation easing, and we saw a bond market that reacted negatively in some aspect to that news. You would think that would be you'd see more of a bond sell-off, you'd see a bigger spike in yield, and whereas you're seeing people buy into bonds, which is driving down yields, which is positive for the mortgage market.
So I'll give this to you guys in a nutshell and pass it to Quinton. CPI, the number this morning about 8:30 a.m. It posted at 8.5%, which was cooler than expected. Core CPI, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, also was cooler than expected. So perhaps we're seeing early indications that inflation has peaked, plateaued, or is cooling. Markets are responding. QB, the show is yours.
Yeah, just in terms of changes, it was flat. So if you think month over month, it was flat. This is good. It didn't go up. We haven't seen it come down, so we would like to see that. But perhaps this is the corner we're turning that's helping do that. It's curious to see what's going to happen with jobs reports as we keep rolling out. I think we're talking about that. A lot of the CPI staying flat is really related to energy prices. So diesel's down $1.80 since its peak in June. Gasoline prices have fallen for I want to say it's the 52nd straight day in a row.
Below $4 now nationally on average.
Yeah. So these are all good things, and I think we will naturally see some economic cooling because we're getting out of vacation time. Everybody's rushing to take vacations, and kids are having to go back to school. So you might see some settling, and some of what is really pushing the inflation just naturally go away without any intervention from outside. Although I still expect the intervention to continue.
The inventory levels, how do you characterize them locally in Central Virginia? QB, you want to start with that, and then Scott, you follow?
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to get Q's take.
I mean, well, it's only been how many days since we talked about this?
Monday, about 48 hours.
Watch that show, it's the same. Yeah. It hasn't changed. No, I think we're seeing a lot of the purchasing frenzy slow down. You know, we've talked about this before, that it's no longer the, gladiator of real estate. You're actually getting to get in and do some negotiating. The housing values are still really strong, so the prices have not dropped, but the instances of sellers putting on for price X and getting X plus Y is kind of feels like that's mostly a thing of the past.
Scott Morris.
Not totally, but mostly.
Jump in here, Scotty.
No, 1,000%. I mean, this has been, I refer to inventory as a living organism, and it's a living organism that got decimated for 24 months. In order for us to get back into a more normal market, some of that's got to return. There's got to be some slowing. We can't have 20% valuation increases year over year. It's just, it's not sustainable. And not just that, we've got people going out making, for a lot of people, the largest purchase they'll ever make in their life, and they can't get a home inspection. I mean, returning to some form of equity there for the person trying to get in the game against competing against investors who are stepping in because of cash flows when rates were so low is something that's really beneficial, I think, not just to the market, but to us as a people.
Joseph Martin giving Quinton Beckham some props here. Some questions are coming in already. Joe Martin, if you have any comments or perspective you want to relay live on air, please put it in the feed. I see 3 states on the show. So this is one of the questions that's come in. You guys talked about CPI. Can you help us understand what this means locally from a Charlottesville market, a housing market, and what that may mean to us in a more layman's perspective? That's a great question from Christopher. Who wants to start with that one? So this is the Cliff Notes This is the conversation we'd have at the bar.
So a lot of what's changed in the CPI, if you were out shopping a month ago in Charlottesville and you realized that your $4 seedless organic watermelon was now $8, that's probably not going to be back down to $4 yet. There's a lot of studies on how we feel CPI, and it is primarily women who feel CPI. It is primarily women who are in charge of grocery shopping. And although there are other folks that also feel it, as a vast majority of the nation, it's women who shop, and you feel it first at the grocery store. And you usually don't feel it on single purchases. You need to have some aggregates that you do over and over and over. Gas prices have come down, diesel's really come down, and that's a big deal for groceries and things that we have to buy every day, because a lot of those food miles and transportation costs get wrapped up in what you pay at the grocery store. But remember that those are lagging. So the food that you're buying this week, next week, the week after is still at a higher price from a week prior when it got there, and so it's not going to come down at the same rate. What we want to see is this continued sort of calming and stuff going, and then you'll see it start to trickle down. We're always sort of looking in the rearview mirror at what used to happen, and you're going to feel it a little bit further down the road.
I say all the time on the show, I mentioned this 2 times ago when Quinton was on, the main friction point with my household and our wife and I is the groceries. And she's like, sweetheart, I'm buying the same stuff. It just costs more money.
Oh, my $200 trip is now $280 trip.
Mine was ours is $200 a week as well,
Yeah.
and it's not happening at $200.
Yeah.
And that's the friction point here. She's like, I can't help it. I'm buying the same stuff.
That's and that's part of it. When we talk about how does that affect us regionally, it depends on who we're talking about, because there's certain people. I talk about us being in a relatively insulated area where there's certainly those that are affected more greatly than others, and as Quinton was talking about, inflation affects different items greater than others. Some of these things are up 50% to 80%, and some things are only up 3%. Some things haven't moved at all. So when we get into the average of that cost, I'm sure there are definitely people who have had to make adjustments from their purchasing habits because of it. But what we're seeing in lower fuel prices that translate into everything else also affects the mentality of someone who is looking to drive until they qualify, to where when gas prices were low, they didn't have a problem living in Buckingham and driving to UVA, but now they may second guess that, or they went through a period of second guessing that. But what we talked about previously in the year and last year was work from home, allowing that to be a more opportunistic situation for a lot of people. I think that's lower gas prices makes it feel better for people who are making those decisions.
Good answer. Second sizzle right there, J-Dubs. The follow-up from Christopher for the panel, he says, Jerry, you talk about we're having more money in our pocket each month. How does the panel think that's going to impact what they do for work? So the stat that CNBC just put out here in the CPI story was, with CPI cooling a bit, the average worker or American now has 0.5% monthly more in real wages at their disposal. Quinton Beckham.
0.5%, you can retire now.
You can get that seedless watermelon.
That's so much money. I do think like one of the positives that you might be already feeling if you're living further out from Charlottesville because you needed a bigger home, you didn't want to pay prices to live closer in, certainly you're saving money on the gas pumps. As we're still expecting rates to go up, take whatever that chunk is that you're no longer paying for gas and cover your grocery bill, whatever's left over, pay down a credit card. Just sort of keep reducing that debt while we go through this. It's one of the things we would like you to do economically, as opposed to accelerating the other things. It's also a safer bet for you.
Very nice. Scott Morris.
It's advice I should take, by the way.
So you do a good job of taking your own advice.
Refresh me there. I apologize.
The extra spending power, how that may impact your business or how it may impact real estate locally.
And so I think my point is, as we continue to expect feds to raise prices and rates, so they're meeting again in a month, are they going to raise it by, the argument is not, are they going to raise it or are they not? Is it going to be
how much?
By how much?
Yeah.
These have a really direct and fast effect on your credit cards. If, when we had this big spike and you were traveling because you were allowed to, you put a lot of things on credit cards, or you covered grocery bills or other things with credit cards, This money you're starting to see come back in terms of lower gasoline prices, maybe a little bit lower price at the grocery store, put that and get rid of that debt. Because that can eat up that 0.5% in wage that you've made as those credit card rates fluctuate.
He's talking about floating debt.
So-
we've been talking about floating debt on this show
And loan
all
officers
year.
love it when you show up with less debt than you had 6 months ago.
Yes, he
Yes,
does.
yes.
Scott Morris just smiled right there.
Now,
Good job, Quinton.
to highlight that, recent studies have started to pick up that Americans are carrying more credit card debt and less savings than they were throughout the pandemic.
16 trillion, the American household debt, the highest it's ever been right now.
And to cap that off, we as a nation are now more equity flush in our homes than we've ever been. Now, this is something that there are some very big predatory corporations that are trying to capitalize on.
Ooh.
And I believe that this is potentially our next financial crisis. You have a bunch of non-banks, non-traditional banks, internet mortgage companies that are moving into the home equity line of credit space. And they're doing that so that they can suck up that equity, and they're selling it to people as a means to capture that credit card debt. Well, Americans traditionally are not super responsible spenders. So what's going to happen is you're going to have, if they succeed in branding this and selling it to people, you're going to have people who go in, take the scoop of the ice cream, pay off the credit card debt, now carry the home equity line of credit, have eaten into the equity that they had in the home, rebuild the credit card debt, and then can't sell out of it. And that's how we get back into a 2008, and that's what we're beginning to see happen with a lot of these companies.
The HELOC opportunities are everywhere right now. You're
And
getting bombarded with HELOC.
From people who would not do them or would not touch them from a risk perspective in the past are going after them because
the traditional financing opportunities have dried a bit.
not because of that, because of the amount of equitable growth and appreciation and value that we've seen in homes. There's more equity out there. This looks like a place for them to go in and then take risk.
Interesting. You want to touch that, Quinton Beckham?
I think I was just reading the rates bumped down over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and we saw a little flush of refi.
That's true. That's
activity
correct.
going on.
That's correct.
I think we've talked about this a lot, and you're in a unique position. So when you talk, I just don't want anybody out there to listen to him and do what he does. Don't treat your house like a commodity, or a piggy bank. Have your wage, do your income, make a budget, live on a budget, pay down the floating debt, and I understand how attractive it can be to pull out a HELOC, to pay off credit cards and drop that rate. But if you can also set aside money to just pay off those credit cards, you're probably better off doing that, so that that money that is in your house that's available in equity is for things like college tuition, family tragedy, medical
roof.
bills. That really needs to be
Deferred maintenance that needs to be happening to the property so that you don't, find yourself in a position where you need to sell, but then all of a sudden you're 3 to 4 months behind the curve because you've got to do all these things to catch up.
That really should be a panic button item. So if you're not in a panic mode, then I don't recommend it.
Well, let's talk refinances. Did you see some? As he highlighted, the rates dropped quickly. Now they've gone up a smidge.
I mean, so the bulk of people who refinanced at 3%. I've talked to somebody yesterday. He's like, I'll never refinance again. I'm at 1.99 on a 15-year. It's like, and I just had a friend texting me that I know refinanced it about that.
1.99 on a 15?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And from a perspective of refinances now, it needs to come from a place of need and usefulness. Like, be talking to a trusted advisor who's giving you the right recommendation. Like, okay, let's go look. So you've got a car payment at this. You've got these credit cards. If we do a refinance and capture this, and you're going to have a 5% or 5.5% or whatever that number is rate versus this 18% on these credit cards, 8% on the car. Yeah, let's make sure it makes sense. Where if you dip in with the home equity line of credit, the thing can adjust on you, and then all of a sudden you're kind of back in the same boat. Just be mindful of what you're doing and talk to somebody who genuinely has your best interest in mind.
The HELOC the rate adjusts.
So let's say that you dip in now, and you take the money at whatever percent they offer, but then you pay it back down. So you take 30 grand, pay it back down, and then 2 years from now you go back into it. You're going to have a different rate 2 years from now than what you did originally.
But that's acknowledged up front, though, right?
It is acknowledged up front, but it's acknowledged in the way that people,
in the fine print that people don't read.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point right there. Your agents, what's the buzz at Keller Williams? I saw one of your successful agents, Patricia Irby, this morning.
Isn't she amazing?
She's
doing
amazing.
Such a good job.
She's always, and I've mentioned this to Patricia, she's always very stylish, very stylized. You can tell she has an eye for fashion.
I'm sure she's ashamed of me at multiple opportunities. So
she has an eye for fashion. What is the buzz in your office, QB?
So we're in that period, and we saw this when we entered the pandemic, where the reality of the market is still catching up to the mentality of the clients. And so there is this space where somebody started thinking about putting their house on the market when the market was super hot and prices were really high, and now the market has not just shifted, but it has swung violently to a different place here, and their brain has not yet caught up to where we are today. This has happened before. This is really common. As we've talked about in real estate markets, when they fall quick, and when they rise slowly and steadily. So we're sort of in this.
The way I talk about the bond market.
Yeah,
that's right.
They're all the same things in that regard. And so we're still in this space where, although housing values are very strong, the days on market are going up, buyers are much more reserved, and so we just want to be realistic about what the housing market is today. And now that people are traveling, we're back in this seasonality that we have not had for the last 2 years, but people are gone on vacation. Keith's napping in a different place instead of in his office here in Charlottesville on the other side of the country.
Keith is in San Diego.
So there's fewer buyers in town, fewer families in town. There's a lot of concern about consumer price index and mortgage rates, what's going on with jobs. We've got a great jobs report, so that's good. And people are coming back to town to put kids in school. Give it another 2 or 3 weeks. Keep reading, keep talking. Then decide if you need to move to put your house on the market. But if you don't have to put it on right this second, you probably take a pause. We would also like to have a vacation, by the way. It's been a rough couple of years, so you just take one with us, that'd be fine.
Your thoughts on that, Scott?
I think that rings true almost this time of year every year with, do you want to get it on and get good photos while there's leaves on the trees? You want to keep people out of your house during Thanksgiving and Christmas? And do you want to get some normalcy back to the kids and everything with school? Again, people are going to make decisions based on their individual needs and wants. And but not just that, follow your trusted advisors. So if you've got Quinton telling you, hey, look, do you need to do this now, or do we develop a plan for the next step, and then we execute then? And nothing happens as fast as any of us want it to happen. And we've become more and more kind of brainwashed into this instant mentality. But if you can take the time to develop a plan and execute, you're generally going to end up with a better result than just going out and doing things on a whim.
Kevin Yancey's got something for us. Nikki Chambliss, hello. She tags Patricia Irby.
Hey, Nikki.
I tag her as well. She is always looking stylish, Patricia Irby, and you should see her forehand on the tennis court. Kevin says a real life experience for his family Sunday at Walmart. Helped an employee load trampolines on display. He told me these are from last year's orders. We have 3 trailers of trampolines on the lot, 66 pallets, 5 per pallet, drastic markdown, $500 normally on sale for $198. This is just one Walmart in Waynesboro. Inventories are picking up. Inventories are picking up across the board at all the retail stores. Another sign that maybe inflation is cooling or peaked.
Well, think about
Scott's got something to say on trampolines
The trampoline
here.
thing is great because that's a perfect pandemic emotional purchase type of think when nobody could get any of this stuff because everything had shut down in shipping and manufacturing in China, and then you've got the Walmarts and all these people oh my God, there's so much demand for trampolines. It's because nobody can leave their house.
Yeah, and you want your kids in the backyard backyard.
And then all of a sudden it's like, well, think who's the buyer at Walmart? Like, let's load up on trampolines. And then now the life comes back, and now you've got more trampolines than you know what to do with. And it's not just trampolines. There's lots of other examples of those types of products that during the pandemic, when people couldn't leave their homes, it was like, let's get this stuff.
Peloton bikes.
Oh, Peloton.
Yeah.
Ooh, talk about a stock that just took a beating.
In the crapper.
Yeah.
Post pandemic, or in this endemic stage, Peloton is not doing very well right now. We'll go to a comment on LinkedIn for the panel. Scott and Quinton, are you seeing the outer areas starting to get weak now that gas, inflation, and multiple inventory or too much inventory is on the market right now? We should debunk that stigma. Quinton, you've done a good job of debunking that.
Too much inventory on the market? Is that what the state?
He said there's extra inventory.
I just would never use a word like weak.
Yeah.
This isn't some. I think when we talk about this, we like to think of it as a balloon, and it's been big and inflated, and now things are cooling off and it's shrinking again. And that's not what's happening with house prices and housing values. The difference. It's not. If you're expecting to get a deal in the next week on a really great house that's $40,000 cheaper than the exact same house that sold 90 days ago, you're going to need to switch countries. This is not something that's going to happen here. What you are going to have is the ability to step in, pay the reasonable price without paying extra to beat off the other people.
Negotiate for things that you may actually need or want done.
And so I know nobody likes the rates, but the rates and the slowdown are buying you things. They're buying you the opportunity to maybe get seller-paid closing costs. They're buying you the opportunity to have a real home inspection and get things repaired. They're buying you the opportunity to actually spend 2 or 3 nights thinking about it in most cases. So there is a payoff for all of this stuff that feels bad on the buy side. But if you're thinking you're gonna look around for this really perfect house that's gonna be this sudden deal, this is not 08, 09, where housing values are crashing. Remember, we're having a slowdown in the greater economy, and that is slowing down the sales of houses. We still have a low inventory keeping that up.
Which is continued appreciation of value. Now, there's 3 fundamentals here that I think all are like the legs of the stool for Quinton's argument. One is we still have more people than we do rooftops. That's the reason rents are continued to exceed, even though that it's not a great place to be. If you can get in and purchase, the best time to do it was yesterday. We're coming off of the steroid era of rates and housing. So the government took its thumb off the scale, and we just returned to normal. This isn't a deflation. This is a return to normalcy. This isn't. I just got a text from somebody who texted me the price of this property, what he wants to do, and he's not on Facebook, so I can say this, that he still thinks that prices are inflated 10 to 20%. And I'm like, where are you getting
housing prices?
Yeah, I'm like, where are you getting this number from? Now, so consumer confidence, steroid era, and more people than rooftops. And if you take those things and break them down individually, you get why this return to normal is just that, a return to normal. This isn't a bursting of a bubble. This is us starting to be able to rebuild this living organism that is inventory and starting to create realistic transactions for people who are making these purchases.
What do you think about that, Quinton?
I think that's a good way to put it. I'd also like to go back to the trampolines. If you're thinking housing is like the trampolines, you're thinking of 08, 09. 08, 09 and the trampolines are a perfect metaphor. We had a lot of empty houses that were purchased but not rented. We had a lot of foreclosures, and we had stacks and stacks of trampolines taking a bunch of space that people needed to get rid of because they were costing something while they were sitting there empty. And so they sold them at cut rates. And as rates cut, values and appraisals cut.
And a consumer confidence, a fear mindset. You had people walking away from mortgages because all of a sudden they were upside down, even though they necessarily they could afford their payment, but they walked away because they saw somebody else do it. So why would I go buy a house and put myself in that position? And that you had homes that no one wanted to buy, versus now even in a higher rate environment, people still want to purchase. People still understand the concept of why am I paying this rent instead of investing in myself?
Quinton Beckham.
What we have in housing is what we have in cars. So cars are just really hard to find. The number of used cars being sold has gone down, but the price has stayed up. And it's gone down just because there's not enough of them out there to buy. We're not getting new cars on the lots because we have chip shortages. Housing's the same thing. So all the things, a $25 chip can stop a car from running, and steel can stop a house from going up. Lumber, delays with appliances and cabinets can stop a house from going up. So the current housing market is the same thing as you're seeing in the car market. Prices are no longer skyrocketing up, but there's not enough of them. They're not the trampolines for those prices to come down. So I think there's strong values in all of the markets that we're talking about that are continuing to be strong in comparison to a year ago and 2 years ago and 3 years ago and 4 years ago. And I don't expect that to change. What I do expect is for the frenzy that skyrocketed those prices, where the house that sold today is $30,000 more than the house that sold 2 weeks ago, that's pretty much over. So this is really, take a breath, get your kids back in school, sit down and talk to a loan officer, talk to a realtor that you really trust, get your stuff together, and you've got some time to really look and see what works best for you. There's a lot of comments that I've been seeing on various social media about why buy now when house prices are high and rates are high. Rates are higher. I don't think the rates are high. Right. And if you're expecting house prices to come down in the next 2 to 3 years, without there also being some other economic disaster that makes it impossible for you to buy a house, I don't see that. I don't have the crystal ball out, so I can't, use my magic powers and tell the future. But in the absence of something that really causes you so much other pain that house buying is off the table, house values are strong and they're going to stay there.
You got something?
The rates argument is as disingenuous as the gas price argument.
The rate argument, the only reason the rate argument exists was because of how quickly they went up. It was just sticker shock.
Okay, well,
yeah,
okay.
But I agree with you.
So
I agree with you.
people were like, I can't believe gas was $1.68 now and it's this now. It's like, okay, well, they
your voice just changed right there, right?
Yes.
Wow.
He does a lot of impersonations on the show.
I pictured a cartoon character.
That was good.
So we had no demand. We shut the entire economy down. So, of course, the cost for fuel plummeted. The government was buying its own bonds at a rate that was unprecedented. So, of course, the bond market was
You're
low.
saying it's not a fair comp.
Yeah. I'm saying people go out and they say, well, gosh, rates are so high now. Compared to what, bro? In 2018, they were almost where they were today. How long ago? 4 years ago? So you're saying that 4 years ago, rates were high and you shouldn't buy a house. I don't think that was the argument. I think people were still doing a lot of successful levels of business at the time, and I think they're still doing successful levels of business now. I do think we, again, just beating this dead horse, but a return to normalcy in the market is where we're going, not some bubble that's bursting.
I agree with everything you said. For the sake of a talk show, the difference with this year versus 2018 was how quickly the rates spiked. And that's what created the sticker shock. Where in 2018, if there was an increase, it was marginal or an increase that was not felt really. That's the difference.
Sure, for the sake of argument, but at the same time, we didn't have a government that had its thumb on the scale and then said, hey, we probably shouldn't be doing this, and, or maybe we should have stopped doing this months before we actually did.
Quinton.
I think a lot of times when we're talking about economic stuff, what we're really talking about is the middle class. 68% of the U.S. economy is powered by consumerism. Consumerism is powered by the middle class. Things that everybody's been doing for the last 4 weeks, like taking vacations and traveling and hospitality service, which is why we saw those jobs come up, because people are going back to hotels and they're back in restaurants. This is really what powers the economy. And so when we're talking about this is good, we're not talking about if you are under middle class, how hard it is for you. So please know, we haven't forgotten about that. That's still a thing. And we still want that to ease up. Until it eases up in this middle class portion, the gap becomes so huge, there's not much to do about it. I do believe that all of the indicators we're seeing are good in terms of slowing down the market, because what we've done is we've created such a gap that getting into a house particularly in the frenzy, was damn near impossible. And so we had a lot of buyers go by the wayside because they couldn't compete, they couldn't get in. The ability to step in and be competitive now with an FHA 3.5% down loan is really, really high. This is good news. It's good because you're not being shut out of the market by people that have even just 20% down. You have an opportunity now that you have not had for years, that we don't know when it will come again. And if you don't like what's happening with rates and house prices now, keep watching your rent over the last 3 years and over the next 3. You'll really not like that.
Very well said.
So I understand that it's not always in the moment the most exciting thing in the world, but we're trying to plan for a life that we have a little more control over, a life that you get to design. And part of making that life by design is taking care of your first biggest expense, and that's housing. If we spend 40 to 60% of our income on housing, which the further down the income scale we go, the higher that number goes, you really have to plan and lock that in. And I think when you're trapped in rentals, it becomes this spiral because you're no longer in control of it. So even if it's super, super tight now, do some good planning, make a budget, get into that, because in 5 years it'll be so much better. I know house prices are really high right now, but if you go back in time, pick a time backwards, what would your life have been different if you'd bought a house 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago? 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, it'll be just as good. You know, some variation, but taking control of that and locking that in, I think, is a really important part of being successful in life and creating some mobility and some security for yourself and your family.
Poignant perspective, QB. Russ Connors watching the program. Russ giving Scotty Morris some props over here.
Russ was my roommate in the Marine Corps.
He's watching. Century 21's finest.
21 Redwood, yeah.
There you go.
He's a 21 New Millennium like OG. He was like 1990, 2001.
He's enjoying the show. We'll welcome Shore Pump and Richmond to the program here. I'll throw this question to you, and it's something that he highlighted that maybe should be more of the narrative. During the COVID period, 2020 to 2022, he said it perfectly. It was damn near impossible to buy a house. Now it's much more likely that you can buy a house. The narrative perhaps is, look, yes, rates are higher, but the competitive landscape is not nearly as robust as it was, so the outcome is much more likely that you will win.
So, 100%.
That's what you're saying.
And 1,000% agree with that. The one thing that I think is still a challenge and has actually become more challenging is the entry price point
is higher
for a first-time buyer.
Yeah.
Which some of that is being absorbed with some wage increase, but at the same time, I mean, we're talking about people who were making $12 an hour now making 15 or 17. We're not seeing that mid-range, that, you know, like a 20 to 30 jump there, which is where it's more difficult trying, you know, you could get a house at Lake Monticello for $185,000, and that's just not there anymore. Or how, you know, we ring the bell on Charlottesville and affordability over and over again. That's where, and then qualifying for, you know, any number of the down payment assistance programs also, because they limit your, you know, with anything that's given, there's something taken away. The thing that's always taken away is risk. So when they limit the amount of total debt to income to 45%, then all of a sudden you're in a position where it's like, well, gosh, I could qualify for this, but I don't have that kind of money. And that's part of the rent cycle that we see as well, is how do I save this money with this ever increasing rent, which is why I recommend that you put in your Tinder bio, must qualify for a mortgage.
Swipe left, swipe right, depending on your mortgage qualification abilities. That is a new one. I have yet to hear that for Tinder and matchmaking in the Central Virginia region. Scott Morris, Ross Mortgage, right there.
I'm picturing Tinder profiles, you know, to survive today, every household must have 2 jobs.
Nikki Chambliss.
So if you don't have a second job, don't call me.
Are you still watching Nikki Chambliss? Monday, Tinder came up on this program. And today, Wednesday, Nikki Chambliss, Tinder has come up on this program. I thought you would get a chuckle out of that. All right, so we're highlighting for everyone because, I mean, and Kevin, Nikki is still watching. She found it hilarious. Kevin Yancey, we respect your opinion. You comment, you watch on this program all the time. There's many that believe what Kevin Yancey believes, that it's about to fall off a cliff, that wait months, if not a year, and you'll get a better deal.
There were people that believed the earth was flat for a really long time.
That's what I gotta say here. We're still having.
I'm not sure that I want to go that far with this, though.
We're still having to reiterate that the massive equity in these houses and the regulatory nature of financing is much stiffer now than in 2008. We are still reiterating this because people don't believe us.
My belief in the future failure of any crisis, I think, is related to these companies that are going in and trying to chip away at the equity that we have at the moment, and I think that problem is 5 years from now at the earliest, but I believe it's a dangerous problem. I think that what some of these non-traditional bank mortgage companies are doing in order to like mosquito that money is dangerous, and it is what it is, but I don't think that we're there in our current circumstances towards some fiscal cliff or the housing market just collapsing.
I'm in a complete agreement. Let's hear some perspective from the QB.
I mean, I think there's absolutely instances you can point to where people have, in the midst of all of this, gotten a great deal. These are the outliers, though. So we're talking about things along a bell curve, and there are used cars out there, but they have to be used cars people will buy. And if you peruse listings right now and you go see houses that have been on the market for a while, some of them are not because of a price difference. It's because the house is not in good shape, and people are not interested in that. There is a definite relationship between these supplies and demands, and we're seeing that play out. And most of us need to live in the middle of that. So we talk in the middle of that bell curve. For your individual situations, you need to go be very specific, because you're not interested in the middle of the bell curve. You want to know exactly where you are on it. That requires sitting down with a trusted counselor, going through the finances, your personal situations. Money is always a thing. We know money is always a thing. And there's a lot of other things around that make that house purchase really, really important, and a decision that you should make with the best advice possible.
Let's go to Spotify for a comment. I love the folks that are listening on Spotify that are interacting with the show. This comment from a viewer with a handle on Spotify. So you guys talk about the entry price point, and we know the entry price point's always going to be competitive around here, but can you offer some discussion on the middle price point and the higher price point? Because it seems like from looking at Zillow, those are the houses that are not moving. The entry is going to move around here, but the middle and higher is not. You want to touch on that one at all? Location specific, I would respond. I mean, you guys are the experts. To say broad strokes that the middle and high price point are not moving, I don't think is accurate. It's perhaps a little bit more location specific now.
So when we started the show, Quinton was talking about potentially properties that where someone could have sold at X so many months ago, and now they're having a challenging time doing that. And I think you're seeing maybe an expectation from sellers and agents who are having to deal with these expectations for certain properties that are getting priced maybe higher than they should. And that's where you're starting to see some more days on market. But if you're talking about a property that is prime and you love it and it's priced right, everybody else loves it too, in that middle to high price point range, they're still on the market for less than 5 to 10 days.
Good answer right there. QB.
And I think you're seeing two things happening at once. He's correct. We talk about pricing a property right, and what we're having a difficulty with in the larger real estate market is we're accustomed to markets changing over the course of months, and the market 4 weeks ago is just as different from today as the market 4 weeks from that was different from 4 weeks ago, and on back down the line. It's changed very, very quickly. And it's hard to catch up when you're not sitting and living in it every day like realtors and loan officers and people that do this sort of thing. So there is some catch up going on. There is also a change in the number of buyers that are out there. As rates dropped, then I think the stat was in January, there were 50 million people that qualified for the median price point in the country. And median is super high. So when we talk about entry level, I'm not sure that I even have a real firm grasp of what an entry level home costs right now, because the median price point is over.
Nationally or in Central Virginia?
Nationally, over
Yeah.
400 grand. Central Virginia is not that far off. So you have fewer people trying to crowd through the doors, and you also have housing prices that haven't quite caught up to the realities of today's market. And then I think there's things that have nothing to do with any of that, and that people got to get out of their house again and travel, and they're just not looking at houses right now. They're going to do it when they settle down. We're feeling some of that seasonality again that the pandemic stopped. And so many things are happening at once. Although it's really fun on the show to point at one thing and say, this is what's happening, that's only this true. And there's this whole big picture of everything happening at once that affects this. And so in your personal life, those other parts are probably much more relevant to you and much more apparent. And we're mostly talking about the economics that really center on housing. I'm concerned that the house prices continue to climb, because that whole housing affordability and affordable housing topic is getting harder and harder, and those bridges are going to need to be bigger and bigger.
Almost impossible, the housing affordability in this market. Throw to you contingencies and appraisal gap coverage with your clients. Contingencies, what kinds are you seeing? Appraisal gap coverage, are you still seeing it? Can you give us an example of the normalcy you see returning?
Nothing like what we saw before. In fact, I usually don't catch a lot of that unless it's. So I was talking to somebody the other day, and she was telling me one of the things we were talking about was we kind of went through this phase where, as things started to shift, you had sellers who were, you had buyers who had been just beaten for months, who, as the shift was occurring, were going in and making over offer bids that they maybe didn't have to make. And you're starting to see less of that as everybody kind of like catches up to, as perception changes, and what you're seeing come across days on market, property specific as well, shift. So I'm seeing less appraisal gaps because I'm seeing less crazy offers.
I'm actually really happy that the real estate market is shifting how it is, because what we were doing before was a dead-end road and was completely unsustainable. And, when you hit the brakes on the train, you're going to have sparks and a lot of squealing, and so I know that that's really exciting, and you're looking at that right now, but we needed to slow this down. It had to slow down. There was no way to continue
It seems like one of your biggest challenges, where the brokerage and brokerages in general biggest challenge, is managing the expectations of a market that's rapidly changed with your clients.
Challenge and responsibility. Our biggest, I've said it before, when I think of clients that are unhappy with me from my past, the two biggest reasons is not educating well enough and not communicating well enough. If there's anything I can point to where clients have been like, those are the two things. And I think it is our responsibility and our challenge, because it's changing so fast that a conversation that was really great that I might have had with a specific client 3 weeks ago is no longer 100% valid. There's things that have changed just in those 3 weeks and just in those 4 weeks. And so I think it's incumbent on us to do a much better job of really staying on top of that, really educating our clients, really giving them all the information. You are still the decision maker, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer or seller. You're the decision maker. We want to give you all the best information, be really honest with you about what our expectations are and what we can and cannot do for you, because we cannot overcome the market. We can just help you swim better in it and not get taken down by the other debris that's in there. So,
what kind of momentum are we going to see the fall then?
I think when school back is in session, we're going to see another bump. I think you need people to sort of chill out a little bit. There's been a whole lot of change all at once, and people have just gone from struggling with one price hike to the next hike to the next hike, to still having COVID go around and lock people down, to trying to get into vacations, to sitting in airports where flights were canceled. And in normal life, these are things that we do. This is what we do. And house buying is a piece of normal life, but it's a blip that, if I have my druthers, happens to you every, at best, 5 to 12 years, and not every single summer. And so I think people are trying to get back to real life. I want them to do that. I like these sorts of pauses for real estate compared to what we've had, and just really settle in, spend lots of time, get really well educated about what's going on, and have a really realistic conversation.
Same question for you, Mr. Morris, this fall.
What do I see this fall? Kind of touched on that earlier. Like, I think if you're out there talking to your trusted advisors, you're living your life. You know, kids are back in school. You don't want people in your house during Thanksgiving and Christmas. You want to get photos while there's leaves on the trees. Your grass is still kind of green. I think we're going to see more inventory come on. I think that the frenzy is less than what it has been, and that's going to be a continued theme. But again, and that's what we need. We need the inventory needs to recover. It's a living thing. It's what helps everyone navigate. And yeah, Quinton, 100% right on. What we went through was not sustainable. It wasn't healthy. I mean, look at. From a groceries perspective, like if you went in and every day you're like milk is 20% higher today than it was yesterday. Like, man, we did it with toilet paper. It's
hand sanitizer.
Yeah, it's hand sanitizer. It's one of these things where there has to be for healthy markets more balance, and just in all, like, just everything in your life, you gotta have a little more balance.
Scott Morris, guys, Quinton Beckham dropping some knowledge today in the program. Any comments that we're missing, we'll get to here as we wind down today's program. The data is definitely driving markets green. In fact, the NASDAQ is surging right now. A lot of the tech stocks tied to rates are booming right now. I mean, the NASDAQ is up nearly 3%. All right, Quinton Beckham with some folks from Ness and Real Estate 3 and Logan Foster on the feed here. The message to the community with summer winding down August 10th. Hopefully the next time we see you is still in August and not the fall on this network. The message to all those that are watching here, former car president and an owner of a brokerage. What are you telling your guys?
To take a deep breath and relax. Enjoy the quiet time. This is what we need to do to have the market reset. And I think as a bigger association of realtors, as larger groups of other brokerages, one of the continuing conversations we're having that I just want to keep pushing is we're still missing that middle part of housing. We're missing those condos, and we're missing townhomes, we're missing duplexes, we're missing the higher density housing that will really affect affordability in the ways that we can't do anything about. And so I want to continue to push that conversation. We were missing it before the pandemic. We were really missing it during the pandemic, and we're missing it even more now. And I hope that as we continue locally, if you want to see a difference in your locality, that is the biggest difference when the low down payment mortgage programs don't help anymore, when semi-nonprofit organizations can't bridge the gap anymore. It's that increase in less expensive, higher density, middle ground to entry-level housing that we're missing that will really make that difference.
Follow-up for Quinton. Grayson, thank you for watching the program. Can Quinton talk about price adjustments and when the agents and the clients determine the time to do an adjustment? We talk about days on market still not being very long historically, so what are the indicators for a price adjustment when the DOMs aren't that long historically? Great question.
I think it's a very individual conversation, so it has a whole lot to do with the specific house. But I think what you're seeing right now is a lot of houses that are in a balancing act between, am I not selling because I'm in the pause, or am I not selling because my price is too high? And the truth is, it's probably some of both. And so those are discussions that agents and clients have to have. Sit tight, watch. If there's a house that's perfect for you that can afford, don't wait and let somebody else take it. But I think those are discussions that are happening as we speak. And in the end, we recommend, and the seller chooses. So remember, it's always your choice as the seller. But I think you're going to see some of that cooling happen, and not weak, but just not outrageous.
Yeah, well said. Scott Morris,
Yes,
anywhere
sir.
you want to go?
Anywhere I want to go? So, kind of to piggyback a little bit on the question that Quinton had, talking about what are you telling your realtors? So with my partners, one of the things that I'm focusing on right now is what are you doing to reload your business? And what I mean by that is if the frenzy isn't the frenzy anymore, are you going back to basics, and what does back to basics mean for you? And are you contacting your database? Are you, let's look at maybe not looking at, what different lead sources could be, targeted mailing, different types of things that maybe you hadn't done before, or you've talked to someone, they know there's a successful path, and you've developed a plan to work that. Is that what you're doing now as opposed to January for next year? Are you building a plan to create success as we go through this shift? And for the buyers and out there, are you being prepared as far in advance as possible, whether that means contacting me or contacting a realtor to develop a plan to get you out of your rental situation and into being able to purchase. Because there's again, in 2018, we were selling a lot of houses, people doing a lot of business. This isn't a boom and bust. This is just a return to normalcy. But unfortunately, with a return to normalcy, for a lot of us, that means there's more work involved, because things just don't. You talk to new agents who constantly who bounce around in the beginning. It's because and they chase leads, and rather than going, well, I just met you, Joe, Jane. You've got 300 plus contacts in your phone. How many of those people actually know you're a realtor aside from what you posted in your Facebook story? And it's about setting in the fundamentals to go in and do that work.
Very nice. Last one just came in on iTunes. What is a healthy DOM on this market, in this market for Quinton Beckham? That's an interesting question.
It varies by price point. So the higher the price point, the longer the days on market. But we're getting back to the 2 to 4 week range. Keep watching, because I think you're going to see it continue to grow. We saw this when we entered the pandemic. When markets change dramatically, consumers pause. And I think we're in that pause. So I'm not sure that I can predict when it's going to end, because that depends on how the news continues rolling out. But I really, here locally, I'm not even worried about anything until school's back in session.
There you go. Quinton Beckham, guys, the principal of Keller Williams Alliance. We've nicknamed him the QB, or the quarterback. Scott Morris is of Ross Mortgage. Two fantastic guys. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you for letting me join you, Scott.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
He'll never let me back again. You just watch.
Hey.
Quinton Beckham is always welcome. Always welcome. Judah Whitcower, our director. This is Real Talk presented by Ross Mortgage on a Wednesday. All the shows archived on realtalkwithkeithsmith.com. Keith and Yonna enjoying the sunny beaches of San Diego as we speak. The I Love CVille show is up in about an hour and change. So long, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Take care. Good job, fellas. Is it done?
Thank you, sir.
Lights are off.